Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silvermont, and this is a video about the higher arts, the magic of Dark Souls and Demon Souls to a lesser extent. There are three primary schools of magic in Dark Souls: Soul Sorcery, Pyromancy, the divination of fire, and the miracles born of gods and their legends. And of course we have the Dark Sorceries, also known as Hexes, and that's what this video will cover. Which is the strongest? We'll discuss it from both a lore and gameplay perspectives, even if magic as a whole is woefully underpowered most of the time, as a result of the Dark Souls combat engine simply not favouring it. Now of course in Demon Souls we had but sorceries and miracles, and in Bloodborne we have the arcane arts. But we'll not be breaking this video up per game, but rather by school of magic. We'll start with the Soul Arts, Soul Sorcery, also known as blue laser beams everywhere. Right off the bat we know that Seath the Scaleless was considered the grandfather of sorcery, and that magical damage, as in sorcery damage, is effective against physically resilient materials, including iron armor, or as the description of Soul Arrow makes a point of, tough scales, which means it would be effective against the ancient dragons, whom Seath betrayed. Perhaps his lack of scales also translated into a lack of a proper dragon breath attack, meaning sorcery was his way of making up for that. We also know that the mysteries of souls, crystals, and the sorceries are deeply intertwined. Seath binds himself to a crystal that grants him immortality, and crystals reinforce soul magic, and life itself begins with the soul. You can see how they might all be connected. Soul sorcery is almost the manipulation of life itself, rather than some elemental force, making it perhaps a little closer to blood magic from other settings. Aside from dark sorceries or hexes, we also have the light sorceries or golden sorceries of Ulasil. These appear to be more akin to traditional elemental based magic, perhaps more arcane in nature, as they manipulate light and time. The repair sorcery was part of everyday life in Ulasil, yet seems to involve isolated time reversal. That has a lot of implications. You can certainly use it to repair a damaged statue, but what happens if you use it on an injured person? Could you restore a lost limb? In a way, Ulasil's magic seems advanced even beyond Vinheim. The Sealers of New Londo, meanwhile, curiously had healing sorceries that could soothe poison and bleeding in humans, but as to how they worked, well, we have no idea. Dark sorceries or hexes, meanwhile, have immense physical weight, whereas standard soul arrows and the like are presumably more like piercing light, with less tangible form. You could look at it this way: soul sorcery manipulates the soul and draws from the soul, whereas dark sorceries draw upon humanity. And in much the same way that oxygen can be poisonous, so too can too much humanity be poisonous, as evidenced from the Dark Fog spell. New sorceries are created by talented individuals, such as old Big Hat Logan and the wandering sorcerer Strayed of Olathis. And why, it seems at times, sorcery itself has given birth to individuals. The sorcerer Navlan could be a form of living magic, either a being born from pure sorcery, or a man who somehow obtained a form of immortality by transforming his very soul into sorcery. The scholar Audia appears to have been a talented sorcerer who experimented with various forms of it during his time. Whilst most sorceries are designed for violence, Chameleon could well have been created by Dusk of Ulasil as a playful trick. And there are some sorceries, mainly those of Ulasil, less inclined to violence. Overall, sorcery is extremely versatile. I would claim more so than any other schools of magic in Dark Souls. Its applications are extremely numerous. So let's move from sorcery to something a little more primal. Pyromancy. The term itself means divination through fire. But in Dark Souls, pyromancy is the art of weaving fire. Whilst there were ancient fire sorceries once known, they have been lost even as of the first Dark Souls, yet they did make an appearance in Demon Souls. Probably not the exact same thing, but hey. Whilst Soul Sorcery is effective piercing damage, strong against armour and scales, fire is effective against corporeal beasts and undead, who fear flame by their nature. Chaos pyromancies are similar, but just as the Chaos Flame was a twisted imitation of the first flame, Chaos pyromancies are, as their name implies, more chaotic, enhanced by the power of humanity. Similar to how soul sorceries can be reinforced with crystals. Curiously enough, the Witch of Izalith and her daughters weaved firestorms much like the pyromancy Fire Tempest against the dragons. Fighting fire with fire, are they? Not that the ancient dragons seem to breathe all that much fire. It is known that some sorcerers look down on pyromancy as the work of dullards, simple by nature compared to the intricate, delicate soul arts. But the results are certainly explosive. Yet not all pyromancy is about throwing fireballs left, right and centre. Eingi created the terrible poison and toxic mist abilities, perversions of fire that eat away at life. Salaman mastered the fireball, and his own pupil Carmina pioneered unique new pyromancies such as Flash Sweat to reduce the caster's vulnerability to fire, along with Iron Flesh and Power Within. Carmina harnessed the power of flame to actualize the inner self. Fancy words, but you can't argue the results. To put it another way, Carmina mastered the art of internalizing flame, which started with Flash Sweat but then led to other pyromancies, such as Power Within and the like. And like a moth drawn to flame, undead rapport charms the undead into being allies, if only for a fleeting moment. Pyromancy and sorcery are said to be like oil and water, but in fact their origins can be traced to a common source. That stands up when you consider that flame, the soul, and life itself are so intermingled. The first and greatest of souls were found within the flame, after all. And some sorcerers embrace this duality of a sort. Strayed was a gifted pyromancer and sorcerer, for example, and whilst healing pyromancy and healing sorceries are rare, both exist in a form. What does that say when both arts, stemming from life, are better suited to ending it than preserving it? Yet, the pyromancy warmth is a gentle healing flame that comforts those in the vicinity. Fire is what the caster wishes it to be, and Dark Souls 3 tells us that Chaos pyromancies birthed all later forms, which presumably means Chaos pyromancies were the original offshoot of fire sorceries. And we know sorceries began with Seath, pyromancy with the Witch of Izalith. But what about miracles? To cast a miracle, the caster learns a tale of the gods and says a prayer to be blessed by its revelations. So in a very basic way, sorceries are manipulating internal energies, pyromancy is manipulating external energy, and miracles are borrowing energy from on high. The exact nature of miracles is mysterious, as you could be a dark wraith, intent on ending the machinations of the gods, but still flinging around sunlight spears. In essence, it seems the key to miracles is merely to learn and recount the various divine tales. For example, the miracle Great Heal excerpt is a fragment of a much larger tale, resulting in a less powerful miracle. Perhaps the same is true of the lightning spears. The weakest is one chapter, whereas Sunlight Spear is the original, full tale. Other miracles are warped by the passage of time. Wrath of the Gods becomes Force, for example. But what about Havel? It seems he created Great Magic Barrier as a means to have a defense against Seath's sorcery. But how does that work? Did Havel write a little book about a man who was protected from magic? Or was it closer to some other form of divine magic he created, which can then be copied in miracle format? If they are tales of the gods, Does that mean we are using imitations of their original divine magics? Miracles are simply records of those spells. Unlike the other two schools of magic, miracles are a lot more nebulous and vague. Caressing Prayer in Dark Souls 2 states, "This spell was recently developed and may not be an authentic miracle, and yet it still functions perfectly well." Does this mean so long as you have faith in the miracle, its authenticity doesn't matter? Interestingly, on the same miracle in Dark Souls 3, we learn that Caressing Prayer is a tale of the many deaths surrounding godless Kytha, of whom Amorn was a follower. Kytha, of course, being one of the new gods brought up in Dark Souls 2, and this is a recently made and possibly not authentic miracle. Something to chew on. Throughout history there have been many examples of imitative miracles. When discerning original from imitator is nigh on impossible, which is which hardly matters. One can never gain full control of the power of the gods, but with a little favour from Lady Luck, this spell will destroy your foes. That would seem to suggest that miracles are just that, tales of the original gods' divine powers that we can imitate through sheer force of faith alone. Seems doubtful that we need the actual gods to bless us, despite what Dark Souls 3 tells us concerning medium heal. Miracles are fruits of the study of divine tales, a blessing from the gods, through acts of prayer. Miracle strength depends on the caster's faith. We know there are man-made miracles, and it seems illogical that the gods would grant their blessing to people using these miracles against them. The possible exception would be Covenant-related miracles, such as Nito's Gravesword Dance and Gwyndolin's Darkmoon Blade. Indeed, Pontiff Sullivan appears to be using an imitation Darkmoon Blade created through sorcery with his Greatsword of Judgment. Maybe that is a slight hint as to the true nature of miracles. Ever since miracles came to be, learned men have endeavoured to rework and remould them to their satisfaction. And there is one more thing to note of miracles, their resonance. When miracles are cast in one player's world in the original Dark Souls, they could resonate across to another world, increasing their power. The Way of White Corona miracle appears to reference this. Long ago, when the imprints left by the gods were still deep, miracles of the Way of White existed alongside Orioles. Those who yearned for the long-lost Orioles fully believed they would return one day. So there you have it. 3 schools of magic, but which do we consider the mightiest? Whilst the Way of White Corona seems to suggest to some extent that miracles were stronger the closer we were to the age of the gods, well, of course it's all a very subjective point, but if we're talking about it from a gameplay perspective, I would argue that miracles have typically been the strongest. Now of course, all magic has been steadily nerfed throughout the history of the series. No more one-shotting bosses with Climax or Great Resonance Soul. But when you consider the healing and support capabilities, rare lightning damage, strong weapon buffs in Darkmoon and Sunlight Blade, area of effect utility such as Tranquil Walk of Peace and Wrath of the Gods, yeah, I'd say miracles come out on top, generally speaking. But of course, there was a time of one-shotting people with Pursuers and Dark Bead. And back when we were all new, homing Soul Mass and Soul Spear, it was quite a good combo. Pyromancy of course had its very good uses, especially in the first game where it was not tied to your stats. When I did my own level 1 playthrough, which is up on my channel if you want to watch it, I mostly relied on the overwhelming power of Pyromancy to demolish bosses in 1 or 2 hits, even at level 1. And then against other players, Great Combustion was always very popular, but not too many players would be hit by a Fire Tempest. Lore-wise, I think miracles tend to come out on top again. Pyromancy is rarely compared with the other schools. We only know that the Witch of Izalith used early pyromancy against the dragons, and that sorcerers considered it barbaric and simple. Soul Spear, on the other hand, is compared to the armaments of the gods, meaning that it is at least on a similar level to Sunlight Spear, and it's using Sunlight Spear as a measuring stick, which to me suggests that it is the apex. But when it comes down to it, the sheer number of variations concerning Sunlight Spear, from arrows to lightning stakes and thunderstorms, gives me the impression that the original miracles were the most powerful. But what the players use, well, if it's largely an imitation and recreation, if you ask me, it would go original divine magic, the original miracles, then sorcery, including the golden sorcery of Ulasil and dark sorcery, and then pyromancy, and finally the man-made miracles. But what do you think? This was a really interesting video to make, and I hope it was entertaining to watch. Let me know what you thought down in the comments, and until next time, take care. This is the part of the video where I should tell you to, I don't know, backstab fish that like button, or cast twop and wog spam that subscribe button, sunlight stake that notification bell, but I'm not going to because that's weird. Either way, have a good one. Ciao.
Feeble, cursed one. Do you really think you can manage the glories that are my spells?